Idle Conversation by Jacen Bishop. Performed by Otis Jiry. I'm telling you, just destroy the head and take out the brain. That'll stop 'em. John says. Ever the Romero devotee, that one. That's your answer. Jay has that look. The one that tells me he's not going to let John slide on this one. We've been over this. Just because practically everyone that makes a zombie film follows Night of the Living Dead doesn't mean it would work. Anthony would agree with me. The fanboy? Yeah, we should ask him. Jay snorts. Of course he'd say that. He's a zealot when it comes to that series. His tone changes into his best attempt at a mimic of Anthony's nasally voice. It's not even close. Zombies don't run. They shamble. And they're not sick people. They're reanimated corpses. That's why all those new "it's a virus making people crazy" movies aren't zombie movies. I rub my eyes as my vision starts to blur, tuning Jay out. I haven't heard this rant before, including the non-sarcastic version. God, my head hurts. I force my eyes to focus on the clock above the fridge. Almost midnight. That can't be right. Seems like it should be later. Like the four of us have been sitting around my kitchen table for hours. Maybe because I'm so exhausted, or maybe because this discussion has been chasing itself in circles. Everything since the restaurant's a blur. Well, he's right, they're not zombie movies. John's clearly trying to resist the urge to scratch at the bandage on his arm. They're not relevant now. Jay has the look of a man who's just found out he's not the real father. What? How can... He stops and attempts to regain his composure. The point is that they have the overall feel of a zombie movie, and that's what matters. Could be a good counter, depends on how he backs it. They force you to look at the genre in a whole new light. Shamblers are only dangerous in numbers. Runners take the threat to a whole new level. What do you do if they can't run? Or can't be put down with a headshot? Or still have the ability to think and reason? That's definitely a good point. What do you do when they can run or even reason? Well, Anthony's not here, so what does it matter what he'd think? Dan says. Well, he's been quiet so far, leaning against the fridge, not saying anything. He comes over and takes a seat at the table. He moves slowly, like his muscles are sore, and I can't tell if he looks tired and haggard or just pissed at the other two. Are you feeling all right? I ask. He briefly glances at the table in front of me. Fine, he says. Dan never was big into zombie flicks like the rest of us. Jay bought him one as a gift, but he never got around to watching it, much to Jay's annoyance. I suspect it's a point of perverse pride on Dan's part. I always wondered what he got out of the group. Jay's about to retort, but Dan's not in the mood. All I know is, it's good that zombies eat brains, he says, cutting Jay off and putting an end to the no doubt masterful point he was about to make. Otherwise, you two would be in some serious trouble. Oh, really funny, Jay says, turning to Dan, his volume increasing. We're trying to have a serious discussion here. Hey! I cut in, gesturing upstairs. Sorry, I forgot, Jay mutters. How is she? John asks. Resting, I reply. Sleeping, I think. I add as I realize I haven't heard anything from upstairs for a while now. I should go and check on her, but can't bring myself to. Dan laughs softly. I remember when we met Jessica. He says, I still say a guy like you had no right bringing a girl that good-looking to a party. I shake my head and smile slightly at the memory of him saying that at said party, in front of Jessica. Then I gave him the finger. I think back to that night. We were headed to Anthony's birthday party. It was the first time I'd seen her in the black flared dress she favored. As we pulled up to his house, I noticed she was fidgeting with her handbag, a rarely seen sign of nerves, no doubt anxious about meeting my friends for the first time. They'll love you, I'd reassured her. Gorgeous and a walking encyclopedia of zombie movie facts. How could they not? At that, the left side of her mouth had pulled up into the crooked smile I'd come to adore. Zombies don't eat brains. John's voice is barely audible. What? Dan's instantly annoyed again, his comment already forgotten. You said it's good they ate brains. That was only in the Return of the Living Dead series. In all the other ones, they eat flesh. Dan looks at me for confirmation. Yeah, it's true, I confirm. The general consensus in Hollywood seems to be that they eat flesh, not brains. Well, I don't think you're going to get much help from zombie movies when it comes to the real thing. I've never seen Jay look so helpless. Yeah, John shrugs. All the movies would give you is a bunch of dead ends. I laugh quietly, despite myself. That pun was awful, and John's always had a habit of making them unintentionally. But that's what happens when I'm exhausted. The stupidest things are far more funny than they should be. And then it happens. The one thing that's destined to happen in any conversation. The pause. You know, that moment when everyone runs out of things to say at the same time. You know what I'm talking about. I bet everything I'd own, it's been part of every conversation since the beginning of time, and it occurs to me in that moment there's true silence for the first time since we went out. No quiet questions of concern from the staff to the ill-looking man at the table next to us that we hadn't noticed until then. Questions that quickly turned to panicked shouts for help and doctors when he started violently convulsing. No screams that quickly spread through the crowd when he suddenly lunged at Jessica and mauled her. No more screeching tires and crunching metal of car wrecks as panicked drivers bolted through red lights into oncoming traffic. No gunshots from the responding police officer as a group of things that had once been other diners violently dragged him down. None of the hysterical yelling from Dan for me to grab the gun the officer dropped. An absence of Anthony's cries of shock and pain when that same, now mangled officer got back up and tore into him. No chaotic din set to a backdrop of wailing sirens. An end to my begging Jessica to stay with me as I fight to stop her bleeding. No more reasons to continue this conversation. I turn to look at Jay, and he stares at me a moment before slowly nodding. This is what he and I had secretly agreed to at the beginning of the discussion. At the beginning, before we realized that no amount of horror movies or hypothetical discussions could have prepared us for this. I pick up the pistol that's been lying on the table in front of me, point it at John, and shatter the pause with a pulled trigger. That possibly dead cop had taken a small chunk out of John's arm. I'm going to trust the movies on this one. Dan stares at me, the shock in his face almost comical. He tries to stand, but I pull the trigger several times before I can protest. He was done too. Wasn't bitten, but was definitely showing the signs of infection. At least I'm pretty sure he was. Looking a lot like that guy in the restaurant. It's as he slumps back into his chair that I noticed I didn't score any headshots. I don't know if it'll matter. I don't think anyone does yet. Maybe they'll both come back. Maybe Romero knows. My arm falls to my side, hand shaking from the recoil, my ears ringing with the discharge. I never realized something could be so loud. Now me. Jay whispers. I'm caught off guard by that, as we agreed on John and Dan, but not this. I raise an eyebrow. Yes, I'm sure. He says, His voice is shaky, eyes watering. I can't do this. I won't make it. I don't want to end up like they are. I realize this is one thing the movies got wrong. I don't experience any moral dilemma in the moment. With all that's transpired tonight, I can't feel anything besides an all-consuming numbness. I raise the gun towards him. Wait, he says suddenly, and I pause. Do you think the Return of the Living Dead got it right? He asks. He sees my confusion and clarifies. That it hurts, being one of them. I mean, do you think it hurts to be dead? I don't know. I whisper. It's the most honest answer I can give. He processes that before looking up at me. He nods. I pull the trigger. In the silence that follows, I find myself wondering what happens next, if I can do this, where the script will take me. I think of the scene Jay was referring to, where the zombie explains why they eat brains. Because it hurts to be dead, that they can feel themselves rotting. I must have seen that movie a dozen times, and for the first time, I shudder in horror at such a monstrous concept. My thoughts are interrupted by an uneven clicking that's slowly growing louder. The sound of a woman in just one high heel walking across a hardwood floor. The kitchen door opens, and I turn to find myself looking into Jessica's face. She's still wearing the black flared dress she wore out to dinner tonight. She's so beautiful. I hear a clatter as the gun slips from my grasp. Jay's question comes to mind. I bet Jessica would know. So I ask. Her remaining eye slowly focuses on me. Her lips twist into a mockery of the crooked smile I always adored. Looks like I'm going to get my answer